Let me start by greeting the President of the Central Tibetan Administration and the Chief Justice and the Speaker of the Tibetan Parliament in exile, to all the distinguished guests who have traveled from far and wide to be with us here today, and to all Tibetan brothers and sisters. I'd like to state and reaffirm, Mr. President, that it is truly an honor for me to have been invited by the Central Tibetan Administration to be with you today as the chief guest on the occasion of commemorating the 60th anniversary of the Tibetan people's national uprising. I am very happy and delighted to be sharing this special event with all of you. I also bring greetings and best wishes from many of my countrymen and countrywomen, and also from others outside my own country, to yourselves. They told me they're very jealous that I've come here and they would have liked to have joined me. I'd also like to thank you, Mr. President, for the wonderful cultural performance that we saw and witnessed last night, showing your culture. And also today I see a display of so many of your Tibetan flags, your people expressing their love for Tibet. And some have even painted their faces with the Tibetan flag. In fact, I would like later on to have a picture with those two gentlemen with their painted faces holding the Tibetan flag that I can send to the Chinese ambassador when I get back to Botswana. I'm sure that I speak for the many other distinguished international guests and supporters who are also with us here in Dharamsala in saying that we are representative of a world community who have not and shall never forget the suffering endured by Tibetans as they peacefully pursue their struggle to once more live in freedom in their ancient homeland. In global solidarity, we too find it necessary to recall that it was on this day of the 10th of March in 1959 that unarmed Tibetans from all walks of life rallied to protect His Holiness the Dalai Lama, sparking spontaneous protests against the increasingly oppressive hegemony being practiced by the authorities of the People's Republic of China. The ensuing violent crackdown of these initial protests only served to fuel what became a mass uprising against the forces of occupation. 6 decades later, it is abundantly clear that the March 10 protesters were motivated by a collective determination to uphold Tibet's ancient and unique national identity and cultural heritage, as well as protect their spiritual and temporal leader. In their actions, they, like so many other patriots across time, exercised their fundamental desire to uphold their own true identity, which is the universal right of all communities. As we are all undoubtedly aware, the March 10th uprising was suppressed by overwhelming military force, forcing His Holiness the Dalai Lama, along with some 80,000 followers at the time, to find refuge here in India. I therefore wish to take this opportunity to commend the successive governments and the people of India for hosting and for supporting you all these years. I'd also like to commend for those who have traveled far from the countries who spoke here before me today for their support and for their kind words and their travels to this destination. Our own presence here today is testament to the fact that while the March 10 patriots were physically defeated, the spiritual struggle for a free Tibet lives on in the hearts and minds, not only of Tibetans at home and in exile, but also among growing numbers within the international community. Coming as I do from a region that suffered colonial occupation, whose own indigenous cultural identity and struggle for political emancipation were likewise long suppressed, I cannot help but empathize with the continued travails and ongoing peaceful resistance of Tibetans as they seek to reclaim their sovereign dignity. The fact that the Tibetan struggle, as reflected in the teachings and diplomacy of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, as well as manifested in the political outreach of the Central Tibetan Administration, continues to be based on the middle way doctrine of nonviolence and dialogue, ultimately aimed at reconciliation with the Chinese state, is truly remarkable, given the extreme repression Tibetans have endured in both the Maoist and post-Mao eras. Here I note that as we've already heard from the president of the CTA about the recent Freedom House survey and a report on the EU-China relations. In addition to these and many other prominent expressions of international concern, it may be further noted that in recent years, many environmental scientists from around the world have become increasingly focused on the importance of the Tibetan Plateau, which contains the world's third largest ice reserve after the Arctic and Antarctic regions, being the source of 10 of Asia's major rivers. In this context, there's an emerging global consensus about the wider risks posed by Tibet's environmental degradation due to such factors as the extensive damming of rivers and deforestation. As we stand in support for a free generation of Tibetans, we are cognizant of the fact that those who dare speak up inside Tibet about issues of religious freedom and environmental rights are being targeted for political prosecution. We note that the mere possession of the image of His Holiness the Dalai Lama remains punishable as a serious criminal offense. We are painfully aware that the surviving repositories of Tibetan Buddhist culture are tightly monitored, while monks and nuns still face expulsion and prosecution if they fail to denounce their spiritual leader. The same sanctions, of course, also face others who endeavor to assert their national, democratic, and religious rights inside the People's Republic of China, as reflected in the growing international outcry also over the plight of the local Muslim Uyghur population living just north of Tibet. This morning, I had the honor to be able to pay a courtesy call on His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I found him such a humble, gentle, compassionate, and caring person. He's motivated by this wonderful spirit and character, and further driven by his religion and faith. And what he told me he wants for yourselves and the people of the world is love, respect, happiness, and joyfulness, and cooperation. He also told me that this century, he would like this century to be a century of dialogue, different from the past century of conflict. Then you have to ask yourself, what do the People's Republic of China fear from him? What do they fear? What do they fear from Tibetans? His Holiness doesn't have any guns, he doesn't have any missiles, he doesn't have tanks, he doesn't have warships, he doesn't have warplanes. He doesn't want to be the president of China. The only thing he has is his faith and his love for people, and for those who, like him, belong to the same cause. And this is the fear which is in China. And not only China, but other regimes and other leaders who go out of their way to frustrate, intimidate, arrest, and even execute their opponents. And the only thing that it is that they fear, the only thing that they want, is to be able to have a monopoly on people's support. And that is called intolerance. If China really wants to be a people's republic, Mr. President, if they really want to be a people's republic, then they should love and respect their people. They should allow their people to have freedom of speech and freedom of association. By doing so, this will bring happiness and joyfulness, as His Holiness said. What we need is in China and in other countries like them, and from leaders, including in some democracies, what we need is wise leadership. Political, economic, and military strength does not translate into wisdom. While the authorities in Beijing may have the power to suppress basic freedoms within their own jurisdiction, they should not be allowed to exercise the same repressive authority outside of their borders, including such things as illegal territorial claims in the South China Sea. It was for this reason that in 2017, while I was still the president of Botswana, I had invited His Holiness the Dalai Lama to my country. And we refused to give in to pressure from the Chinese government when they threatened us. When they threatened us if we failed to stop His Holiness from entering our country. At the time, he had been scheduled to speak at a Mind and Life Institute conference convened in our capital, whose theme was based on human values reflected in the Southern African ideals of Botho and Ubuntu. Unfortunately, notwithstanding our principal stand, in the end, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for health reasons, was unable to attend the gathering, which otherwise attracted esteemed participants from the region and beyond. I personally look forward to what I am sure would have been an enriching engagement between His Holiness and some of the participants. Because it is from these that we get the bright minds from my own country and the continent on their perspectives about the convergence of the core Buddhist principles of unity, peace, and compassion with our own humanist Setswana norms of Botho, which are based on tolerance, mutual respect, and action through consultation. More broadly, I believe that as originally conceived, the conference would have had a golden opportunity to expose His Holiness the Dalai Lama's time-honored wisdom of Africa, as well as Africans, to the philosophy of his. Perhaps that is why the very notion of His Holiness setting foot on our mother continent was so feared by his opponents. At this point, let me express my own tremendous disappointment with my own government, who have shamefully succumbed and abandoned our hard-won sovereignty to pressure from China, and resorted, like China, to similar tactics of intimidation, threats, and attempts to frustrate progressive governments, organizations, and people who wish to meet with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Indeed, the Botswana government attempted to stop me traveling to this occasion. And what is so surprising is that Botswana, until now, had always stood up for what is right in terms of democracy, freedoms, and human rights, which are now under question with this and other deeply concerning issues that are going on right now in my country. But I'd like to thank some of my citizens in my country, some nationals from South Africa and the government of South Africa, some nationals from India and the government of India, for facilitating my travel here, something which my own government would not. Ladies and gentlemen, His Holiness the Dalai Lama's busy schedule of teaching here and around the world, along with his prolific writings, have established him as a truly global icon for the power of human liberation and compassion. It is little wonder that the international polling in recent years has consistently placed him among the world's most admired individuals. It therefore defies logic that some still believe that his influence can be diminished by seeking to deny others the opportunity of his physical presence. Such provocations, rather than only serve to diminish his would-be senses in the eyes of the world as they embark upon human rights violations daily. In an age of global communications, including greater South-South exchange, this has simply resulted in greater curiosity about his humanitarian work and advocacy. In this way, the persistent efforts to block the Dalai Lama from ever coming to Africa have merely raised his profile across our continent. As much I share in the global respect that this has been earned by His Holiness, by his tireless outreach. I'm also mindful that I'm here today at the guest of a much greater community of exiles. Like India, my own country of Botswana has often served as a place of refuge for those fighting the forces of occupation. From Namibian refugees into Botswana to escape the genocidal German occupation of their country at the beginning of the 20th century, to the many other freedom fighters, including Nelson Mandela, who were forced to follow them to escape the clutches of the enforcers of apartheid and continued colonial rule, which once held sway in our region. At the time of our independence, my own country was surrounded by such racist regimes that simply dwarfed us in terms of their military and economic power. Neither did many in the world see any immediate likelihood that the growing number of exiles then living within our borders and elsewhere in the end would return. Like Tibetans, the once oppressed peoples of Southern Africa proved resilient in their determination to achieve a better future for themselves. Like Tibetans, they too remained dauntless in the pursuit of their own liberation, while reaching out and finding support from the international community. Popular sayings at the time were, "The struggle continues, but victory is certain, power is ours." This then, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, is my message of hope for the people of Tibet. While your own struggle has been long, while your own struggle has been painful, you can take comfort and solace in the fact that in your hearts you remain undefeated. In your minds you are fully liberated. In your minds you are already liberated. With such a mindset and the power of your collective determination, your own victory is ultimately certain. I thank you all for your attention, and may you all be blessed.